Good morning, positive people of the world. Welcome to the shed and our second episode of Don't Bump the Needle. I'm here again today with my main man and partner in crime, Mr. Shane Pruitt. How you doing today, Shane?
Here we go again.
Here we go again.
Like we've always been.
We're going to try to stare at this eye in the sky one more time and give y'all some information. If you watched our video from last week, our introduction, you know we're going to jump right into deep end. We're going to start with a man by the name of Hootie Ledbetter, aka Lead Belly. So, like we said last week, this is a mysterious man. Everything about him is mysterious, and we're gonna dive right in. Let's just start with when he was born, because there's some controversy around that.
He's surrounded by mystery. Everything he ever done. I mean, everything he done in his life from start to finish is a mystery, pretty much.
Absolutely.
There's conflicting reports on everything he ever did.
Yeah, there's conflicting reports about when he was born. Some say it's 1885. The census records say 1888.
Yeah. Even where he was born as well. Some people say he was born right outside of Shreveport. Some people say he was born in Maurysport, Louisiana.
Yeah, and there's a lot of vagueness around his early years. It seemed as if he moved back and forth between Texas and Louisiana.
He was pretty much raised in eastern Texas, in the Piney Woods area. His mother was a half Choctaw Indian or Native American, and his father was African American. So
yeah, his father was a sharecropper.
Yeah.
And like Shane said, his mother was half Native American, so he comes from a diverse background already. It's stated that as an early that he showed a proclivity for music at a very early age. I think.
I mean, I'm sure.
Like at the age of 6, he was making his own fifes and learning to play tunes on them at even that early of an age.
Absolutely. I mean, growing up. I mean, I'm sure with the culture that he had from his mother and his father, I'm sure that rhythm was not a problem. Feeling that as a child, you know, and so
yeah,
it was just probably a natural thing for him to gravitate something that makes noises on something.
Yeah, yeah, and we're talking about a man who played the mandolin, he played the harmonica, played the piano, he played the string bass, and this is an interesting fact that I learned doing this research is he played an instrument known as the windjammer.
Windjammer,
aka the accordion, which I had never heard that reference. And as we all know, he went on to play the 12-string guitar, which pretty much defined his sound.
That was definitely his sound. Yeah, he found his voice with that guitar.
Yeah,
So Kalamazoo guitar. It was a Kalamazoo.
Yeah, so he was born around 1888, 1885, and lived to 1949. So one thing that we want you guys to think about is that we're trying to cover about 60 years of history here.
Yeah.
So we're going to kind of move through this pretty fast. And if there's things that you want us to talk more about, comment below and we'll try to get back to you on it.
Yeah.
But it's said that around 1910 was when he married his first wife and moved to Dallas.
Yeah.
And I think that was a pivotal moment in his life, going to Dallas, because he ran into
Blind Lemon Jefferson.
Blind Lemon Jefferson.
And there's also some reports out there that he played on the street with Lightning Hopkins as well, between Houston and Dallas during that same period with Blind Lemon Jefferson.
And I think it was during that same period where he picked up the 12-string guitar as well, and that sort of what got the ball rolling on what became known as his sound.
Because the 12 string is a lot more percussive instrument, a lot louder. You think you're playing on the streets of a busy city, you need to have projection.
Yeah, and I think that was what he really liked about it. He liked that metallic sound, and he liked the fact that he could compete with the sounds
of the street,
of the honky tonks in the streets that he was playing in and around there in Texas.
Absolutely, yeah, no doubt about it.
So it became a tool of necessity, but also became what he was known for.
Found his voice.
Absolutely, and I think that's a fascinating way to find your voice.
Well, it's just throwing you in the deep end of the pool, and you either sink or swim. There's really no gray area there at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And so he spent a few years in Texas, and then I think around 1915 he went back to Louisiana, and that's when
trouble started.
Yeah, things started getting a little bit crazy for the man that they were calling Leadbelly. But although I don't think at this point he was going by Leadbelly, it was further in his career when he picked that name, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But yeah, he moved back to Louisiana somewhere in 1915, and that was when he had his first run-in with the law. And
think about that. 1915 in Louisiana South.
Black man having a run-in with the law. Yes. And he got sentenced to, I think it was 30 days on the chain gang.
30 days, yeah. And he went by the name Walter Boyd. Was an alias.
Well, that was after he escaped from the chain gang, right? Yeah.
You're right.
Because he found life on the chain gang so intolerable that he
Did you imagine?
he escaped and went back to Texas and took up the alias.
That's right. Okay.
Walter Boyd, which then led to his second run into the law.
Yep.
I think that was sometime during the year 1917.
Yeah.
When he was arrested in Texas because he killed his cousin's husband. Yeah. And was arrested, and at that point was still living under the name Walter Boyd.
That's what it was.
Which I find that hilarious. Who takes up the name Walter Boyd?
It's the most generic white sounding name you could ever pick. It's perfect for him. If you think about it.
Yeah. So I think that was 1917 when that happened,
yep.
And he got a pretty good conviction out of that one.
He killed a man.
Yeah, that's true. So he got 7 to 30 years for that one. But it seemed like that time in prison was kind of
it was a turning point.
A turning point for him. I think that was really where he began to focus on his music and learn the repertoire and learn a lot of the songs that he became.
Absolutely. And think about it though. He's on the chain gang during the day, 12 hours out there in that brutal heat of East Texas. And then at night, I'm sure, and on Sunday, he was entertainment for himself and the inmates, to play the guitar and sing.
Yeah, for sure.
And a lot of time on his hands.
Yeah, there's an interesting tidbit on that particular time in jail. As Leadbelly progressed in his career, one of the things that one of his claim to fame was that he sung himself out of prison, not once,
Twice.
but twice. Now, you know, there's a lot of speculation around that, and we really don't know if that's the case. Some people say that it is, some people say that it isn't.
That's what Caldwell always said, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Absolutely. For sure, for sure. I mean, and if he did sing himself out of prison, because he did during his time in this particular stint, he was playing in front of the warden, and the warden was bringing guests in to hear him, and the warden did pardon him. And this was a strict warden who only gave 5 pardons.
He saw the good in him, though. He did. He had to have.
Entire term as warden, but the irony of it is that by the time Belly was pardoned, he had served all of his 7-year sentence except for 5 months.
Yep.
So, you know, he had pretty much done his time.
He had,
regardless, but maybe he did sing himself out 5 months.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's the thing in the study of Lead Belly, we come to find out that, you know, it's quite the juxtaposition. Here's this guy who's, on the one hand, he killed a man, went to prison, but he's also singing for children at African American children's birthday parties.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. And it's
you know,
and it's said that, you know, this, because there's sort of a gap in his history between 1917 and about 1930.
Like every mystery should be.
It's said that he was pretty much a jack of all trades, and that he was farming, he was driving buses, that he was doing all
mechanic,
all of these different jobs just to try to survive. You know, and that was one of the things that he was known for, even while he was in prison, was being able to work circles around almost anybody.
All of them. Yeah, you're right about that.
So he obviously had the drive to try to do things and to try to be a better person, but for whatever reason, he just kept running smack head first.
And that segues into our next one.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think this is probably the turning point. This next event was probably the turning point in his life, in my estimation.
Absolutely, yes, you're right.
You know, and this was his second arrest, or actually his third arrest by this point, which would have been 1930. And there's a lot of mystery and controversy around this. He was convicted and given a 6 to 10 year sentence in Angola, which Angola, for those that you don't know, Angola was a prison that was on a converted antebellum plantation.
Exactly. Yeah,
so you were talking about thousands of acres.
Yeah.
Some of it privately owned, some of it owned by the government, and it was pretty much a replication of slavery.
It was the governor's form of it. You know?
Absolutely, and they would keep these people on these prison camps for essentially their whole life. And they would work and do things that nobody else wanted to do, things that benefited the farmers, things that benefited the state, and it was not a good place to be.
No, not for an African American man in the South in Angola. No way, Jose.
Yeah, and Lead Belly at this point was convicted of attempted murder and given a 6 to 10 year prison. But the story around this idea of this attempted murder is
bogus.
Comes across that way.
It does.
It comes across that way. Apparently, he was listening to a Salvation Army band on the street, and was just doing a little dancing, and a group of white men came by and didn't like what
they saw.
They pulled their knives. He pulled his knives, cut one of the men on the arm. He got sent to jail, and the white man walked away free.
Scot-free. Yeah.
You know, now granted, in hindsight, and hindsight's always 20/20. Like I said, I think this particular event was what really.
Well, had it not happened, the Lomaxes wouldn't have found him. You know.
Yes, and it was at Angola where a gentleman by the name of John and his son Alan Lomax, who were working for the Library of Congress recording folk songs, met Lead Belly, and they struck up a relationship that
it lifted him to the fame he so desired, you know, and deserved. He's the father of folk music.
Yeah, he is. And this was the second time that Lead Belly supposedly sang himself
it's a great story, man. I mean,
Out of prison.
It's a great story to listen to,
Because,
whether it be true or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Somewhere around 1934, while he was still in Angola, the Lomaxes recorded Midnight Special and presented it to the warden at the time. And as the story goes, the warden liked it so much that he pardoned him. And in 1934, later in 1934, he was released from prison. Is that true? I don't know, but it's a good story.
It's a good story.
It's a good story. Now, here's the thing. What does a black man do in 1934 getting out of prison in the middle of the Great Depression? Yes, the first thing that he did is reached out to the Lomaxes and volunteered his services. And said that he was willing to be their driver or their mechanic.
He just wanted into the game.
Or whatever it was.
Yeah, he's willing to do whatever it took.
And, there's a lot of, I know that at that point, Lomax Sr. was getting old and couldn't do a lot of the work. And I think that Al, the son, he was busy doing something else. So Sr. needed some help. And there was a lot of controversy around the arrangement and the agreements and who got what and how much money they got and all of that. But somewhere around...
It always gets sticky when you get the money.
Yeah.
That especially.
Yes, for sure. But John saw something in Leadbelly, and I think also saw him as a gateway to get in to the prisons and get in with the people that he wanted, that he was interested in recording. Yeah,
because they started right after this. They started. His son started going to Mississippi. He discovered Sun House, discovered Muddy Waters on the plantation, the dockeries down there. So it's parlayed into that.
Now, one thing that did happen late in 1934 is that Lomax and Leadbelly decided to take a trip up north. And there's a lot of mystery and a lot of controversy around that as well. He went up to perform for these white admirers.
Upper echelon white admirers.
And the first show they did up there was at the MLA convention. And he was a hit. He was a hit with these bougie white people.
Yeah, he was the talk of the town.
And they loved him. They loved him. But the portrayal of his character, there was a lot of controversy around that.
Well, they were exploiting him is what they were doing. And, whether he was aware of it, who knows, but he was definitely being exploited to provide an image, if you will, on the American consciousness.
Yeah, and it was interesting because it wasn't just white media that was buying into this narrative of him being a minstrel savage, so to speak. It was also the black media. If I'm not mistaken, there was an article in I forget the name of the paper. It was the Philadelphia paper, the largest black newspaper in the country at the time, that was how they had it labeled on the headlines. This minstrel savage takes a break from killing to sing some folk tunes.
I know. It's pretty sad, really. I mean, because it's so polarizing, is what it is, and so they get him out there. He's got the art, he's got the thing, but he's also got the look. And he's got the history. So they had to really.
Yeah, he does, and so they went from this MLA convention to going and playing at Harvard and Yale, and
think about that,
right? Think about that, and it said that Lomax got really angry before the Harvard and Yale performances because of the portrayal that the media was putting out there. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. Lomax could have been behind it and could have been pushing it as a propaganda tool.
He could have been. You never know, man.
And we don't want to pretend to know anybody's intentions when we're talking about this. We're just trying to give you
the facts we have.
Both sides of the stories, because honestly, the truth probably falls somewhere in between.
In the middle, yeah.
I think that's important. to remember is that we don't know the Lomaxes. We don't have any idea what their intentions were or what kind of people they were.
That being said, you know, if it wasn't for those guys, American music would be really, it sucked a lot more than we would ever even imagine. You know, I mean, because he did discover a lot of the icons in the South.
Yes, he did, and I do think that it's really sad to portray somebody as a savage. And during this time,
Totally.
there was also a lot of controversy around, because there are pictures of him performing in prison stripes.
Yeah, and that was all a prop anyway.
Yeah, and we tried to find out who facilitated that, and it's not really clear, and it's not really clear that if this was something that was done once or if this was something that was done multiple times.
Yeah.
We do know that it was more common to see him in overalls with a scarf around his neck to cover up a scar that he had received in one of his altercations. And you know, the flip side of that is it's also important to remember that the country and the hillbilly music of the time was sort of portrayed in the same way, and this continued up into the 60s, you know, with shows like Hee Haw, where people were still wearing overalls and sitting on hay bales.
Yeah.
And
it's even now as well. I mean, it's not to that degree, but it's still kind of the same. The industry wants to push a label. They want to put you in a box, and it's got to look nice and what we want you to look like.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it's ironic to me because we all know that the racial history and tension in this country is real, and it exists.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But
Still is.
yeah, absolutely. But it's weird how they're almost willing to, whether you're black or white, when you're from the South, to push that narrative of being this country
bumpkin,
hillbilly overall, hay bale sitting hillbilly, regardless of the color of your skin.
Yeah, absolutely, and you know they play. I don't know. They play too much on that for me personally, and some of that stuff's warranted. I agree, but honestly, we both have traveled a lot over the years. Southern folks are some of the most human ingenuity kind of people, geniuses, if you will, that I've ever met.
I would agree. There's something in the water down here, especially from the creative art side.
Because you had to be.
Yeah. So, you know, this was 1934 when all of this was going on, and in 1935, that's when that very interesting Time Life article came out, and that was also where the pictures of him being in the stripes came out. This was a busy year for Lead Belly. That was the same year that Lomax took him on as his manager, which is
during
really
Depression.
Yeah, and it's really strange because Lomax was recording artists all over the country, but the only one he ever managed was Lead Belly. No other artist.
They had to have a connection somewhere that made that happen on a personal level.
Yeah, and this was also when the first time that Lead Belly got to go up to New York and perform, which we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But as much as the relationship that Lomax and Lead Belly had, there was also a lot of things that didn't work because he was only his manager for about 6 months.
Yeah, not long.
And this was in 1935, and this is where it gets really strange because after they split ways, you know, money's involved.
Yeah.
People want their money, which they rightfully deserve. And long story short is there was a lawsuit.
Yeah. Because originally it was a 50-50 split between Lead Belly and John Lomax, and then later on, Allen came into the picture, and then it went to the third, and so the Lomaxers now are getting 66.7%, and you got Lead Belly over here with 33%.
Yeah.
And he's the one doing all the heavy lifting. Yeah. And it's his art.
It's his product for certain. You know, so yeah, they split ways, and Lead Belly sued him, and this is the
comical.
This is the comical part, and this is the part that sort of informs me around Lomax's intentions a little bit.
It tells you everything.
You know, when you settle a lawsuit, what was the payment that he received?
$298, 3 payments.
3 payments.
And he
$298.
And he signed away his rights to Lomax being able to write a biography on Lead Belly.
Yeah, Lomax was in the process of writing this book called Negro Folk Songs, sung by Lead Belly.
Yeah. which probably has made millions of dollars.
And Leadbelly gave him all rights to go ahead and use all of the stuff that he had collected from him in this book,
Unbelievable.
and received in return less than $900.
Which in today's money, they're probably worth about maybe 10 to 15,000. Which is a drop in the hat, really, because
It's not going to get you very far.
No.
Not going to get you very far. You know, so this was 1935 when he split ways, and during this time he sort of went out on his own and was trying to do things on his own, and went back to New York City and started playing some gigs at the Apollo Theater, of all places.
And bombed.
And bombed. And
Yep.
bombed. It became a thing, you know. I think that he was up there playing around Easter time.
Yeah, he played twice a day.
Doing a couple shows a day, and people.
But you think about it though too. I mean, that was a time period in the late 30s. You know, the jazz scene's taking over in the big cities. They didn't want to. You know, African Americans didn't want to have. They're getting away from the South thing. They didn't want to come up there and listen, have to face that again. I'm sure that played a lot on the psyche of them and him as well. You know. That puts it back in the field almost, you know?
Yeah. And it was after this, you know, in the late 30s, 37, 38, 39, it's rumored that Alan Lomax, who's the son, apparently had some harsh feelings about the treatment that his father, the way that he treated Leadbelly.
He had a heart. It says a lot about him.
So him and Leadbelly at that point started to foster a relationship that seemed to be a really positive relationship.
Absolutely.
For both parties. And it was at that point that Alan started doing all of the Library of Congress recordings that Leadbelly was on. And I have those albums. I think there's 5 albums in that set. And there's some amazing stuff in there. And through those recordings and through his relationship with Alan, he was able to go back to New York City and sort of become the heartbeat and the guiding light became the popular American folk scene.
He became like the guiding light. Yes, he was Pete Seeger and all the people who got famous for folk music and what have you. They propped him up. They thought he was they put him on the pedestal he deserved to be on all along. And you know, it took that. But he still didn't get his due in his lifetime, you know.
No, absolutely he didn't. But it is said that his home became the hub for all of this folk music that was coming out of New York City. And you know, there were guys up there like Brownie McGee and like you said, Pete Seeger,
Reverend Gary Davis,
Sonny Terry, and Burl Ives, and a whole bunch of people. And it was, you know, Woody Guthrie is quoted as saying is we were learning everything from him. You know,
sitting at the foot of the master, almost. You know?
If not for Leadbelly, you know, we wouldn't have what we have. You know, so at that point, his music was starting to have a big impact.
It was. Times were changing, you know.
And he was starting to get the recognition that he deserved. And this would have been 37, 38, 39.
Early 40s.
But then in 39 again, he had another incident. Ended up back in prison in New York City for I think about 8 months.
What was that? I can't remember what that was about.
It was an assault, felonious assault, and again, there's a lot of speculation. And you know, that was a common theme through his life that he I don't want to say he was a violent person, but he didn't take anything.
Well, I mean, he had to stand up to it. He had to stand up for himself.
And there were several people in his life who said it didn't matter if you were white or black. If you crossed him, you were going to have an issue.
Well, that's on them, you know.
And that's the way it worked. You know, but it was after he did 8 months in 39, and then when he got out in 40. That relationship, that positive relationship that he had fostered with Alan Lomax proved fruitful, and he went on to do a whole bunch of recording. I think he did some recording for Capitol Records somewhere around 44, and he did some recordings for RCA Victor. You know, and they traveled around and went out to Los Angeles, and you know, spent 4 or 5 years
doing
a bunch of recording, which I think was
So that's where his catalog came from, really.
Yeah, and that's hugely important because we got it now.
We have it.
We got it now. And if him and Alan Lomax hadn't have fostered that relationship,
Whole different history.
Alan hadn't have,
Had a heart.
seen the wrongs that his daddy had done and extended that hand.
Try to write them.
A lot of this material wouldn't exist today.
No, that's the truth. That's absolutely true.
So I'm grateful for both of them for.
And we all should be if you like music.
Putting whatever differences they had aside.
Yeah.
And being willing to
I mean, think
go
about
out and
that
make
too.
this music.
You think about that. All right, you got a white man from New York, and you've got a black man from Louisiana driving in the car together all across the country in the 1940s.
Yeah. Oftentimes they couldn't stay in the same hotel.
No, they couldn't.
Eat
Couldn't
the
eat at the same
restaurant.
place. Couldn't use the same bathroom.
And probably were in danger a lot of times simply because they were out there together.
Exactly. I mean, that's.
It's pretty brave.
It is. It's very brave.
It's
very
pretty brave on both of
yes.
them's part, and I respect them for that, and I am grateful that whatever the dynamic of the relationship was,
They met on a common level somewhere.
and they were able to get this stuff recorded.
Yeah.
Because this music had, and as you'll see as we get towards the end, this music has had huge impact on so many people that we know today.
He might be the biggest one. He might be.
He might be. And here's the ironic part is, after him and Alan spent those 5 years out recording and traveling around, he went back to New York City.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, he could go into these jazz clubs, these small jazz clubs, and he had an audience.
He had an audience. First time in his life, probably.
And I think that, from what I understand, I think that was some of the best times musically in his life. All right, and we're back. We're going to have to do some editing, but we're doing well on our time. And like I was saying, 1946, he was able to come back to New York City and perform in these jazz clubs in front of an audience.
Yeah, people that really liked him, they wanted to come hear him, to hear him play his songs. That's huge.
Yeah. The sad part is that, by this point in his life and his career, it was almost over.
It was.
Because it wasn't but just a few years down the road, 1949, that he was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's.
Yeah.
And, towards the end of 49, I think it was December 6, 1949, the man known as Lead Belly left us.
Succumbed to his illness.
So think about that. Just a few years earlier, 4, 5, 6 years earlier, is when him and Alan were doing all that recording. And that's such a small, we think that's a long time, but that's a small window in life.
A small window.
And had they not taken the initiative and sat down and done that recording, so much of Lead Belly's catalog would be lost.
Yes, it would be. It'd be nobody would ever even hear it. And the cool thing I find that his last concert that he played was at the University of Texas in Austin. So it was kind of a homecoming because he was from, not from that area, but he spent a lot of time in that area through early adolescence, I guess. And so it was befitting that he went home to play his last show.
Yeah, and I think that Texas. I think that if we could ask him today, that he would call both Texas and Louisiana home.
Home, yeah.
Because his early life was spent in both of those areas.
Absolutely, those roots go deep when you're from down here this way.
Now here's where it gets really ironic and really mysterious, particularly around the release of this album. But there's a band that some of you may know called the Weavers. 6 months after Lead Belly's death in December of '49, they released "Goodnight Irene," which was one of Lead Belly's most famous songs. It wasn't his song. It's known that he learned that song from his uncle.
Yeah, it's Bob Ledbetter.
Bob Ledbetter, but that song, keep in mind, this was in 1950.
Million seller.
That song sold over 1 million records.
Yep. It's a shame too, man. It's a shame. He didn't get to see it,
And that's he didn't get to see it. And I know that if he had, he'd be proud.
Yeah, in his own way, I'm sure he is, But it'd been nice to have smelled those roses instead, those flowers at least.
Yeah. But the thing is that he left a legacy
Mm-hmm.
He left a legacy that is unrivaled, in my opinion.
It'll be here it'll be as long as time is.
You know, when you look at the people who he influenced, I mean, it was everybody from Frank Sinatra to Johnny Cash to Dr. John.
CCR.
You know, and probably the most popular one is Nirvana.
Yeah.
I am blown away, especially in the younger generation.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know shit about Leadbelly.
I know.
But they know that Nirvana did one of his songs.
I know. That's the only way they'll ever connect that. You know. That says a lot about Kurt Cobain too. How he wanted to dig for things. You know. He liked to you know. Get some juice on it.
Yeah. And you know, he was huge. You know, it's George Harrison is quoted as saying that if it hadn't been for Leadbelly, that chances are there would have been no Beatles.
Yeah.
You know, so
he's right too.
And think about that for a little bit. You know, if this man had not graced us with his presence on Earth, we wouldn't have the Beatles.
Yeah.
How much would that have changed popular music as we know it today?
Yeah, that was huge, man. Are you kidding me? Yeah, some ways I would hope for that, and in some ways I'm glad it happened the way it happened.
Yeah. No, I agree. It happened the way it was supposed to happen. But if you're interested in hearing his music today, get on YouTube and find it. You know, contemporary bands are doing it. Tedeschi Trucks band are doing it. You know,
he did a movie. He was in a movie, if I remember correctly, like a little cameo. Was it his movie? He was playing. Or was it, I can't remember exactly, but I remember it just clicked in my head as soon as I thought about that. Have you looked it up?
Yeah. So that's Leadbelly's life. You know, that's the Cliff Notes, and there's a lot more to it. If you want to dig into it, if you would like for us to dig into it and spend some more time on it, comment below, and we will. We're trying to keep this into small, accessible bites, you know, 30 to 40 minutes, so that you guys don't get bored with what we're talking about. But that's Leadbelly in a nutshell. Amazing, mysterious man who impacted the world of popular music that we know it today in more ways than we can imagine.
It's still touching it every day. He's still alive.
He's still alive.
Still
Absolutely. I can't remember who the quote is from, but somebody said this: "As long as songs of mine are sung, I'm with you on this earth."
That's right.
That's the truth. We appreciate it, y'all. This is Don't Bump the Needle, live from the shed. Come back next week for Miles Davis, Kinda Blue. Have a good day.
Peace and love, y'all.
Peace.